Alun Baker. Welcome back to the Vertical SaaS podcast. They always say never return to the scene of the crime.
Yeah.
But here we are again. Well, look, it's good to have you back on. As a very brief introduction, I know you don't like introducing yourself, so I'll introduce you. Alun is a growth and transformation specialist that has multiple successful exits, fundraising and M&A events in both B2B and B2C technology. He's got over 20 years as a global executive and non-executive across SaaS, fintech, health tech, edtech, energy, construction, you name it. And throughout this period, he's worked very closely with boards, PEs, VCs to prepare companies for fundraising and exits through organic and high growth strategies. Alun, welcome, as I say, again to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, Gavin. And for the great intro. Appreciate it.
Well,
I almost sound good.
Well, yeah. Look, I mean, from my side, that's a very brief introduction, but it would be great for the listeners, I think, just as a bit more of a casual. It'd be great to just hear a little bit about your background, your journey from how you ended up in your first startup to where you are now.
Yeah. Gavin, I came through a somewhat unusual journey. If you look at typical tech journeys, a lot of people have come on. A lot of people come from a technical background. Mine was sales, so I came through ERP sales in my younger days, into sales management, into general management, and then subsequently country, and then CEO roles, and then from there into non-exec roles. So. It's an unusual one in many respects coming through sales, but I think it has its advantages as well.
And what was the kind of journey into the world of startups and working with PEs and etc. for you? Because it wasn't always like that from the beginning, was it?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at my age, when I was first getting into tech, the VC world was non-existent.
Really?
And private equity wasn't something you were generally involved in. So for me, the pinnacle of what I wanted to get to was Oracle. And I ended up as a director of Oracle's industrial applications business. So up at that moment, for me, that was the journey that I wanted to pursue. But when I was in Oracle, I also realized it was a very large organizations, complex organizations, operate in a certain way that didn't necessarily suit me, and I felt I was slightly more entrepreneurial, let's say, or loose cannon, depending on how you define it. So I was approached when I was at Oracle by about 5 different companies, and I was trying to decide what I wanted to do next and do something exciting. One of those companies, which wasn't high on my list, I have to admit, was a company called Tibco Software. And Tibco, whilst they had just IPO'd, in the UK were only 20 people working out of a shared office. And that was in the early days of shared office, pre-WeWork, with low revenues. And they asked me to come in and run the UK, Ireland, Middle East and Africa. So that was my first kind of journey into the unknown, really, where we scaled the business from a few million up to not far off $40 million in a 3-year period. So wow. It was a real interesting moment where you're doing stuff new for the first time, you're breaking new ground, you're putting a product into the market that wasn't. It's a very different approach when you're doing challenger selling. When you're selling something somebody wants, then you're trying to show your product versus somebody else's.
Yeah.
When you're trying to explain to somebody they're missing something in a technology stack, it's a huge difference in the way you approach that. And it really is about trying to get to value. And that's the big change for me, was coming into a world of challenger selling versus coming into a world of it's an established marketplace and you're trying to get one up on one of your competitors. It's a very different kind of game, and I loved it. And I kind of embraced that world probably for most of the rest of my career.
So how long ago was Tibco?
Yeah, Tipco's period. I left in 2003, and if you remember, that was.
And what did they do, Tipco?
Middleware.
Middleware.
So we used to be the tech that underpinned most of the trading platforms in financial services, but we were breaking ground into telecoms. So if you look at networks having that messaging layer, handling hundreds of thousands of messages per second, we were in that world just as 3G came in, and that was really exciting, where people were moving from batch updating to real time. So that was all about suddenly you're moving your data around real time. You're not updating it overnight, and that changed our world really. So yeah, and 2003 was the moment when the .com bubble burst. So that was a real interesting moment if you've been around tech as long as I have.
Yeah, brilliant. And then from there, worked in how many startups since Tipco?
Well, early stage companies. So really 5 relatively early stage companies, and on top of that, I chaired 5 companies that 3 of them were sub 5 million when I got involved in them. So typically a lot of the businesses I got involved in within that, and you have to be careful how you get labelled, within that sort of 5 to 10 million stage that we're looking to break through. Which is interesting, and I've kind of interspersed that with some large companies as well, where I've run organizations 80, 100 million turnover as well. But yeah, it's a fair range. Yeah.
And I think probably maybe I'm incorrect here, but I think Solidatus is probably at that upper end in terms of ARR. And just for everyone listening, Solidatus is a specialised software platform that is involved in data lineage and offers tools to visualise and manage data flows for financial services, health, many other verticals. I've probably not done it justice, but Alun, why don't you introduce Solidatus and tell us a little bit about it? You're the CEO there.
I'm my official title is exec chair.
Exec chair.
Yeah, that's fine. I started as a non-exec chair about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And they had just taken investment from Albion VC, HSBC and Citibank. So it was a really exciting time. And typically when either private equity or VCs buy into a company or take control of companies, depending on the model, they often appoint chairman, and I'm usually the first chairman that a company's had. So that itself is an interesting moment, because you're trying to balance founders' expectations with the investors' expectations, and founders often for the first time are now beholden to a board and are having to satisfy a board, build business plans, hit targets. Previously it was all about themselves. Now it's all about the investor and the board as well. So I was in the company for 2.5 years, and then about 5 months ago I stepped into the exec chair role. So essentially I'm running the SLT of the business to just take it through the next stage of growth. Gavin, I'm a fan of Crossing the Chasm, Geoffrey Moore.
Still need to read it.
Yeah. So Crossing the Chasm's an old book. It's 15 years old or so. Yeah. But the principles still hold true. The numbers have risen with inflation over time. So what you often have with companies is those earlier stage companies, typically the early adopter, the innovative buyers, love tech. And the more complicated, the better, right? And if you're an engineering-focused business, that often, it's a great moment, right? You find people that are embracing your technology, they love new stuff and they want to get their hands on this and they want to get into it, and really celebrate the fact that there are a few people who understand it often, right? Yeah. But when you get across the chasm, it's how do you get over that gap that loads of companies are in, where you don't get over into the main market. And the main market, product market fit, is very different from the early stage, early adopter product market fit.
Yeah.
So get over the chasm. It's all about usability. It's all about taking away all the friction for buying. It's about business case. It's getting to the business leaders rather than the tech leaders. So you're starting to blend the way you approach stuff. And it really is about making it easy to consume your product, making it very easy for business people to understand it. So we're in that journey at the moment, which I'm helping to lead. So.
And it's been quite a journey. We'll run through the 5 milestones that I kind of outlined. Series A funding, of course, in 2021, which seems like a lifetime ago. Partnership with Microsoft very recently, recognised in Gartner's Magic Quadrant, expansion into multiple key sectors, 10 global systematically important banks, and award for best data governance solution. What is it about Solidatus that has built this traction in the kind of data lineage space, and I guess how many big players are there in this type of market?
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's been a cycle, like Gavin, typically this happens a lot. Lineage is explained in 2 levels or multiple levels, but at the top end it's coarse-grained, at the bottom end it's fine-grained, right? So, if you imagine you've got a lake and there's a river running in, it's how far back do you want to get to the tiny little streams that have flowed into there to fill that lake up, right? So lineage is about metadata, and what we are able to do different and better than anybody else in the marketplace is we can get into that super fine grained. Where did the data start? How many transformations did it go through? Did it have permissions? What was the aggregations? And when you ended up at your end result, have you complied with all of the rules within your organization and with the regulator as well? So typically in the banks, a lot of them were doing this their own way, and many of them are doing it with cataloging products that have a lineage capability and would often say to us, 18 months ago, I've got this covered, I can do this at a coarse grain level. What we've seen over the last 6 months is it's just not good enough. And things like BCBS 239, which is one of the really big, hard driving regulations in the bank at the moment, it's kind of the child of Basel III, right? So the regulator's got teeth now and has been fining banks $100-200 million at a time. And many banks have had multiple moments with the regulator, let's say. So, for example, we run a webinar yesterday with 160 attendees just on BCBS 239. So it is the fact that lineage has been around for a while, but now people are understanding that you really need to understand the data in its finest details, and you need to be able to move this back and forth. So you need to see in and out, so the auditor can track that transaction and all of the things that went the end result of that product and all of the transformations it went through. So the other things that have happened, and you just mentioned that, we've been selected by Microsoft to fit into their Purview stack. They've typically chosen multiple vendors for things like cataloging, data quality. They've only chosen us for data lineage. We're also doing significant work and partnering with Quantexa and also Accenture. We've just about to announce global partnership with those. What people are looking at is lineage has suddenly become important in so many different areas. And then there's a final trigger for this, which is cool, which is AI, right? And if you were at Big Data London a couple of weeks ago, it's really amazing. All the messaging's changed. The message now says trust about AI, right? That's the big fear people have. Yeah. Where did it come from? And we are really sitting in the sweet spot of being able to allow you to have integrity and trust around AI. Where did that answer come from? Where did that report come from? And by the way, did it comply with your regulations? So,
yeah, fascinating. And when you're talking through that, the thing that I'm always curious about when companies are really just differentiating themselves and no one can quite keep up, getting to those nooks and crannies as you described. Solidatus, why are you able to do that within the data lineage space better than most? Is it down to the technology that you've built? Is it down to the people that you've brought on? Is it down to, just about curious to get a wee bit of insight.
It's a combination of both things. It starts with people, right? We have hired in the main out of banks because that was our target marketplace. So we have a lot of people who have come from the world of banking, the technology teams in the banking world. So they understood the problem at source. And I think perhaps typical of many British companies, were great engineers. So we've built outstanding products. We have a team in India now to supplement our UK team. We have a large operation in the US as well, but we've just built outstanding products. And Philip Dutton, who is one of the co-founders of the business, is a real visionary in this space as well. So that's also helped us keep ahead of the competition. What's next, right? So, things like scalability, you're looking at the marketplace all the time and wondering what people are going to put out there as the next big challenge, and the logical one, which I mentioned, is AI. So,
and you feel like kind of your defensibility at scale at Solidatus is really that proprietary way that you innovate through data lineage then?
Yeah, look, a lot of people are sort of the initial kind of wow moment for us is that visualization which you talked about, right?
Yeah.
We've built this incredible like crazy mind map that can show you that data going through all of its different stages to all of its multiple sources and all of the transformations that it goes through. So that gives people confidence that it's not just a bunch of tables and I'm trying to work out what's happening. We can actually show you. And then on top of that, it's the proactive thing, right? Gavin, there's a lot of, one of the use cases we have is software development life cycles. When you look at things like cloud migration, when you look at doing any changes in your estate, one of our customers, a large American bank, does 14,000 changes a year to its technology stack. Oh. Every one of those changes potentially impacts data and source and metadata. So if I pull that out or upgrade that, what impact does it have? If I move this to the cloud, what is that doing to my estate? And what we have a huge edge on is, instead of looking in the rearview mirror, we're saying, look, you can't do that because it would trigger this, or you haven't thought of this, you're missing these data sources, and you're going to break your models. So that proactive thing is a real edge for us, and the visualization's a real edge for us. And then other than that, as I said, it's getting into that super fine-grained lineage and being able to do it in ways that most people find significantly better than our competitors, fortunately. Yeah.
I love it. Kind of shifting more towards the market. You're very embedded with PE, VC, you work very closely with Alun VC. Has there been a downturn spend in SaaS, or have buyers just, is it just the new normal? If buyers' expectations went up in terms of what they expect from a product, and is AI accelerating those expectations? Yeah, because I don't really feel like there is a downturn. I kind of feel like this is the new norm.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a good question. It's multiple faceted too, right, Gavin? You've got, I'm a member of a great organization called Boardwave, right? And it's the brainchild of Phil Robinson. Okay. And its aim is to get a Silicon Valley model operating in Europe in a network, right? So both online and face-to-face sessions. Okay. So Boardwave Live has 500 or 600 people at it, and it's full of VCs, private equity, and the greats of the UK and the European technology sector. Mm-hmm. And their live event a couple of weeks ago, you have people on stage from Google, Meta, and private equity, and the very big boys and VCs, etc. And the underlying theme is, there's a slow lane at the moment, which is the rest of tech, and the fast lane is AI. the fast lane's like the Autobahn compared to the 20 mile an hour speed limit you've got in Wales at the moment. So there has been a shift, right? And that shift has been, leaning heavily into AI, but it was also triggered by COVID, right? So we went through COVID. Lots of companies obviously had that stall moment or dip. Loads of VCs, private equity, have to look at their portfolio and say, okay, there's cash calls a lot across my portfolio. Which ones am I backing? Which ones am I not? And then as we emerge out of the COVID world, suddenly people were keeping their powder dry, saying, right, it's now having had that cash shock really in the market. You saw the VC community change towards when are you getting to profitability? You never really saw that as the super high agenda for VCs. If you went back a few years before that, it was all about growth.
Yeah.
Now it's growth, but tell me when you get to profitability or break even.
Yeah.
So that's had an impact on organizations and the way the investments have been spread. So for a year or so, you were just looking at the very top end of the market. Who can be the leaders in this sector? And everybody wanted to invest in them. But of course, eventually people are sitting on a lot of dry powder. They have to deploy it. They're not banks. They're not, getting rewarded for getting 5% interest on their money. They're there to, make investments. And that's the whole idea of the fund model. So you've started to see loosening, larger investments coming in, and the VC community is growing again, which is fantastic over the last couple of quarters. If you look at Albion, they're well ahead of their investment targets this year. I think they're 50% over the investments that they were planning on making, or they were targeted to make. So it's great to see that return of money into the market. Probably, I think the market's less gung-ho now. If somebody's sitting there saying, I can be a unicorn, people are more concerned about, that's great, you've got great market opportunity, but when do you get to break even in that journey? And, being a unicorn's now not, people have heard too much about unicorns. People now want to see good, steady growth with an underlying solid business with great metrics.
And do you think that's the overarching advice you would give to a founder in today's market then? An early stage company or a vertical SaaS company that's targeting a niche market. You must have reviewed hundreds of decks over the past quarter. You get approached about a lot of jobs, you assess a lot of companies. Like, what is your advice for founders building horizontal or vertical SaaS solutions?
Yeah, it's really interesting. You see so many cool bits of tech. I mean, I've seen a couple of amazing things lately, and typically what you've got is expertise in that field, right? So, and everyone's super enthusiastic about what tech does. History is littered with the best tech falling by the wayside and the best marketing companies dominating. I won't go into the database wars, but a lot of people think the best databases didn't make it through. It was the best marketing companies, and if you generate revenue, you can build better products behind you. And that's often been a criticism of European tech versus, say, US tech, where they'll launch with a minimum viable product, get scale, get customers really quickly, and then build the capability behind it, whereas British European are much more steady, build a fantastic product, and then try to build a market around it. So to answer your question, it's really understand your market opportunity, really understand your product differentiator, really think about pricing. I mean, that's complicated. Pricing's complex. How do you pitch into the market? What's your differentiator? What are you trying to solve, and how do you articulate that with value attached to it? And I think that's the big thing. If you again go back a few years, people used to be able to say, I can do this better than anybody else in the market, and I'm going to build something that's 5 times quicker or does stuff somebody else doesn't do or does it easier, right? And all of those things are relevant. Now but what does that mean? Are you actually de-risking something, or are you bringing serious, recognizable ROIs into the situation. Therefore, I can now see what you're doing to disrupt this market. So, that I think the big thing is understand what value you bring and be able to articulate it. So when you're building out your decks, you're going, right, everyone's seen these, right? It's a TAM SAM model that says, the market's 10 billion, I just need 5% of it. People are looking a bit deeper nowadays and going, okay, so what's your average order value going to be, and how do you price that effectively, and how do you justify that compared to other people, and what's the ROIs around it? So you're getting into that business value a lot more. And then,
but isn't that super tough to do in the really early stages? Like when you're asking people such revenue generated, and they've only maybe got a few trial customers, but VC is all on growth, but now it's changed a little bit. Do you think we're moving further and further away from the US mindset, i.e. minimal viable product, get out there, fucking go, and just iterate? I think we're moving less away from that now.
Yeah, there is an argument to say that's true, actually. But don't forget, Gavin, there's another layer of investors behind the VC Series A. It's the seed money, and that seed angel money is much more on that edge of risk, and you've got something great, and I see a market opportunity.
Table stakes.
Yeah. So you've got table stakes, and I think also people are taking that kind of, again, that US model that says, once upon a time I launched a business called Wigoo, right? So for when you grow up, and I didn't understand why people said being an entrepreneur is a young person's game, because I had all this knowledge, all this experience. But when I was building Wigoo with 20 odd people in India, out of mostly my own pocket with some angel money, I was still paying mortgages, school fees, and everything else in my life. And then the challenge of an entrepreneur when you've got that baggage is huge.
Yeah.
But when you're building it, when you're eating pizzas and living above a garage, you're doing it with a lot less money. So I think it is understanding, if I'm launching something new, it's a long journey before you start to make money. Don't get me started on capital gains tax, right? If we do something bad with that.
We had a discussion about this last week, didn't we, in the pub when the news came in. But I couldn't empathise with that point more. Like 6 months into the journey for me, and it's managing the expectations, right? It's like I'm working for myself. I'm going to make hundreds of thousands of pounds in the first. No, it's never going to happen.
No.
Like, it's nursery fees. It's everything compounded when you've got a family. It's tough those early days.
It is. And
very,
it's
very
always
tiring.
longer, Gavin. Always longer than you expect, right? So, and I guess that's the other bit of advice. If you've got a range about the time it takes to start to generate money, or the time it takes to start generating a living, by the way,
add a few years
add some time to that, right? Because nothing goes to plan.
Yeah, I feel that. That at the moment. Well, look, to go back to your three successful exits, is it? 3 exits you've had? I've wrote multiple here, but
There's been a few. Yeah.
Heavily involved in over $1 billion worth of transactions. When you're approached by a headhunter or Albion VC or whoever it may be to assess a company, whether to come in as a CEO or non-exec chair or an exec chair, what are, for Alun, the early indicators that signal that a company's ready for rapid scaling? Like when you just sit down,
that's a real playbook? Yeah, I mean, that's a real interesting one, Gavin, because you still have this, and as an executive recruiter, you must see this a lot, right? I sat down with somebody not that long ago, and I have to be very careful how I position this, where the headhunter had said it's a scale-up. And I've sat with the chair and the lead investor. And when you actually dig under the covers, that a new product had been launched, it hadn't actually generated revenue. The new product itself would actually impact on the old product and the go-to-market channels in a negative way. And people are positioning it as a scale-up. I'm sitting there saying this is a transformation, right? This is, and you know, you could almost go turnaround because the revenues have been flat. So the big issues are always how realistic is where when somebody approaches to hire somebody like me or any other exec, they usually want to trigger something, and it's often replacing an existing CEO, or it's bringing a chair in and they've just brought money in and now they want to hit the accelerator, right? So it's really having a good conversation with people about, right, if you push the pedal down, will it actually kick petrol into the engine and shoot this car forward, or electric, or whatever it is? And it's just making sure that everyone's aligned with the same understanding of the challenge. How realistic is it? Just saying, I want to double, treble growth, but I'm not going to spend any more on marketing and I'm not going to hire any new salespeople. And by the way, the current team is great, but they've been only growing at 10% for the last 5 years. You know, you start to smell some very odd things then at that moment. So, look, no rapid change. Well, I have a lot of sayings, Gavin. I'm a terrible person saying that. Definition of madness is to keep doing what you're doing and expect a different result, right?
Yeah.
So you know, it is that willingness to embrace change, understanding the need for change to actually deliver on that new plan, and sitting down with the people to make sure you're across the table from people who are aligned, right? Because that's the alignment moment. And what you're often seeing at the moment, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will recognize it, because people went through this wave of investment and they're going into the next round, you know, valuations dropped and people still haven't come to terms with some of those things, right? So, yeah, we thought we were going to grow at 100%, but we only grew at 15. But, you know, your target, if you come in, will be to grow it at 70%. And, you know, you just want to make sure everybody understands that commitment, what that's going to cost, that they're prepared to back it. And whether they're backing it out of cash burn or they're backing it out of EBITDA, it just doesn't happen out of thin air, right? So it's just having those alignments.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of those things are, yeah, it's great insight just to see what someone like yourself is thinking before taking on that. Some of it, again, just playing devil's advocate, a little bit table stakes. I think it's interesting what type of metrics someone like yourself looks at. If a company's, say, going to go from, I don't know, they're doing 10 million ARR and they bring in Alun to go through a transformation, and the idea over the next 2 years to get to 40 plus million ARR. The questions in your head, you must be like, well, I need to find out this X, Y, and Z on top of the, you know, the table stakes type of thing. And I guess lessons learned from the best of times, and they're probably double-edged sword, the worst of times as well. Like the lessons learned from your exits, biggest ones that you think you've taken away from it.
Yeah, so some of the metrics you talked about, you know, when you look at CAC over LTV, when you're looking at cost of sale and the lifetime value of a customer, often those metrics need to work, right?
Yeah.
Because what you're always asking yourself, and I've been in this situation a few times where, you know, you're thinking of a Series B, you're thinking of an investment, and it's surprising how many people can't answer this question, right, Gavin? If I give you 20 million, 50 million, what will you do with it? Where will you spend it, right? Because if you don't have a functioning, right, we've all read the books, we've all been in companies where you've got conversion rates from, you know, SQL through to, MQLs, marketing qualified leads, through to sale qualified leads, through to closing, right? Shortlist closing. That funnel has changed so much over the last 5 or 10 years, and often those metrics are not recognizable.
Right.
So you have to look at all of these things and not fool yourself. So you have to say, are these numbers making sense? Because if they're not, I've got to change the marketing approach completely, right? We all know telesales is so much harder than it used to be because people are working hybrid. That's changed things enormously. You know, so how do you get to people? Digital marketing has gone up in costs enormously because everybody's after the same words, same target audience, and you start to see the costs. Even things like LinkedIn marketing's gone up, Google AdWords, all of those things have gone through the roof if you're in a popular area, right? So getting to the people in the market with the right message That's a huge challenge. So fine-tuning your message constantly so you start to get results that you recognize. So you always have to ask yourself, if I stick $500,000 more into that marketing budget or $1 million more into the marketing budget, I know what that looks like when it drops out the bottom.
Yeah.
If I commit 3 million to growth, what's the number of ARR I need at the bottom of this? Bearing in mind, the multiplier on the ARR is the important thing, right? So, you know, let's look at current times. If you're growing at 60, 70% at the moment, you're going, you know, the market's coming back. And for the top companies, you're getting 12, 15, 16 times now again. But if you're struggling, you're burning cash and your growth is slowed, you're still in the 6 to 8 times ARR, right? So when you look at those end numbers, depending on what you're going for next with a series, the next series, next round, or you're going for an exit, you have to look at how much money will I spend there to generate what ARR at the bottom, and does that make sense when I multiply it into my enterprise value? So you have to look at all of those things. Then you look at your sales team and go, what's the average success across my sales team? So if I hire 10 more salespeople and they're on average performing at 50%, 60% or 100%, whatever that is, I've now got some clear metrics I can invest in, right? Then it's also putting huge discipline on product, right? Early stage engineers build what they think the market wants. To move to the discipline of things like design thinking, where you really understand your customer, where you're sitting down with them and say, if I build this feature, does it change the world? You know, often customers are just saying, this bit about your product's rubbish, takes too long. You know, that's like general housekeeping. You've got to do those things to keep your customer happy. But if you're building new features, you're really going to get into your customer, into the prospect world to go, how important this feature is going to be. Am I going to get a return on this? Is it going to improve my renewals? Is it going to get my net revenue retention past 100%? You know, what impact is it going to have on metrics that are going to be valued when I go through a fund round or when I go through an exit? So you start to think very differently about the allocation of resource and cash, because the acquiring company or the investor are looking at all of those things.
As you prepare for that moment and you're doubling down on your core product, I think we spoke about this before, how do you ensure that the whole business, if you're overseeing a 200-300 person business, you know, I call it product featureitis, where people just build stuff on top of stuff because they think, well, everyone loves us now. We've got a core product, so we'll just go and build other stuff that we don't know if they need, but they'll buy it anyway because they love us. It's not true. Like, how do you stop that from happening? Just go, guys, just double down on this. We are trying to grow. We're trying to be acquired. We're trying to push the product even more. Forget about all this stuff. How do you then differentiate? Again, probably not as a first-time CEO, because I don't really think companies want a first-time CEO taking on a job like that, but maybe an earlier on in their career CEO managing all that stuff.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm really keen on doing, which I think is an often lost concept to people, silos develop in organizations really quickly, right? And you can, you know, I've been in 50 people companies and
easier to manage.
Silo, but they silo quickly. And the reason silos develop is as you start to move away from, you know, that early stage super entrepreneurial, and you've got investors in, you've got a board, people are under a different level of pressure, right? So you're applying metrics. So I love OKRs personally, because that's objective and key results. What is my objective for my business? How does that objective play into engineering, play into marketing, play into customer success? And what key results do I need out of this to prove that that objective makes sense? And when you start to do that, what you get is interdependent key results. So somebody may say, I can only do this if engineering developed that, right? Or, you know, there are lots of things start to happen. And what that enables you to do is create cross-functional teams. So, and that is super important, right? If you're looking to go to market, who should be involved in a conversation about go-to-market ideation or go-to-market change? And that's, well, it's your engineers, it's your pre-sales teams, it's your marketing team, it's your sales team, but it's everybody has an opinion, because by and large, it's surprising how many people in your organization are customer facing. So it's really understanding, how do I pull the knowledge you're gaining, engaging with a customer success or engineering, with the sales, what they're seeing. So everybody has to have an input, and the ideas come from everywhere. So breaking the silos down by creating cross-functional teams, and then getting super disciplined about ensuring that you're building what a customer wants. So when you move from a single product to multiple product, look, when you reverse my previous saying that says definition of madness is doing the same thing and expecting a different result, you can apply that the other way around, which is, I want the same result, but I've done everything differently. So don't get sloppy as you grow and you launch new products. Apply the same disciplines that got you success from the first one, right? That market understanding. Don't assume your customers' loyalty forever. Don't take them for granted. That's the worst thing you can do.
It sounds like that cross-functional kind of feature teams are so important to you to keep that going. To go back to a point you raised roughly at the beginning, you talked about the fast lane and the normal lane, fast lane being AI and normal lane at your AI conference. Like, in terms of the biggest opportunity for AI specific solutions, I guess, to outperform horizontal, more agnostic solutions, have you kind of been spotting any opportunities or seeing anything where you see the most opportunity for disruption, you know, in terms of AI? And maybe that's an industry, or maybe it's a certain function, I don't know, but just you've been attending a lot of things these days, and
so AI is really interesting, right? One of the things that come out of the Broadway event is, when you look at enterprise large language models, LLMs, they are way off, right? Because the compute power to handle those kind of variables, even with NVIDIA and being the most valuable company in the world, we just haven't got there yet. And you're seeing people like Elon Musk do some really clever things with network computing. Quantum computers are suddenly like the big thing again, which is great. But so... And by the way, LLMs will probably end up like operating systems. There'll be a small number owned by giant organizations, whoever they may be, right? So where the key will be is to look at very niche LLMs, or even, you know, some people call them SLMs, you know, small language models. So you understand that layer really well, and I understand that data really well, and I've got the discipline around it, and I can apply my AI to that, because that makes a huge difference. So for me, I think you've got to do two things, and it's certainly what we're doing at Solidatus, for example. We're looking at AI within our product to improve usability, speed, and extensibility of our product. That's super important. But then you're looking at it from our side, we're looking at about how our product supports the AI world. So I think it's important to look at AI in two ways, internally and externally. I think if you're not looking at AI, I think you've got to ask yourself, where's the threat come from? Where's the threat come from? Could somebody out of Silicon Valley with, you know, 20 million of money build what you do today using AI quicker and take away your future quickly? So don't for 1 minute think that you're safe in a world you're in at the moment if you're not thinking about that threat.
I mean, if you are a tech company and you're not using it in some way, it's it could be massively detrimental. The thing that's not annoying me, but the thing that is becoming a little bit mundane about the AI chat is that it's all just around, let's be honest, in my world anyway, you know, industrial is very different, construction, etc. But certainly in financial services, legal tech, insure-tech, it's a lot of automation. You know, it's just a lot of automation of processes and documentation and mundane tasks. But I'm trying to, obviously, with these podcasts and speaking with leaders like yourself, really try to get to the bottom. But look, I think we don't know yet is the answer. We don't know, but how do we really deliver real industry intelligence? Like, automating tasks is great. Like, I love it. You know, I now don't spend a week building a target landscape for my client for an executive search, and I now don't review 5,000 companies manually. because I don't have to. Because I've got AI, so a week-long task now takes me 2 hours.
Yeah.
You know, so that's amazing, and I love it. But yeah, just trying to dig a bit deeper. But I think maybe we just don't know yet.
So Gavin, early in my career, I was in the ERP world, right? And I spent years going into factories, going into retail outlets, going into, eventually things like trading floors and everything else. And when you look at the early stage of ERP, every worker saw you as a threat, right? Because you're going to computerize what I do manually. And what we used to talk to people about is what we're doing is taking away the mundane tasks to allow you to do the clever stuff. And what we're seeing with AI is something very similar, right?
Yeah.
I'm taking away the mundane task, and by the way, some people are probably quite rightly saying this is like the new industrial revolution. It's bigger than the origination of the internet. It's that impactful.
Yeah. You think that? You believe that? Yeah.
I do, but I think what's important to understand, everyone goes, oh, we won't have any jobs. Well, you know what? You have to understand that that free thinking, super smart, intelligent thing that human beings are, that creativity and all of those things are what people will cherish and value always, in my opinion. So if I can take away the manual tasks and the mundane so that I'm thinking more about what it is that makes a difference, and I'm engaging in the high value stuff within my role, then happy days for everyone, right? Because the mundane is what we mostly hate ourselves. Now, that will evolve over time. But I'm not a person that thinks, the advent of AI means we're putting our feet up and none of us have jobs, so what are we going to do with ourselves? Careers change quickly, new roles emerge, your function emerges and changes, and I just think, it's going to make people's lives easier, but it doesn't take away the human, right? There's always going to be a need for, yes, there's some things you can automate, but then there'll be other jobs people need people in, being that go-between that makes things work out of those AI models.
Yeah, fascinating. Look, we'll end it there on a lovely bit of AI chat. But Alun, thank you for the time. I'm conscious of our time, so we'll pause it there. But yeah, thanks for coming on. It's been a great discussion.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. Thanks,
Cheers,
Gavin.
mate.
Cheers. Take care.